All right. Thank you so much for keeping it daybreak. And we are just about to start our conversation for the day this morning. Our focus is on the education sector. We know that we are having this conversation at a time when there is the ongoing implementation of the competency-based curriculum in what the government sought to achieve equity and actually access to education for all children in the country in terms of quality. This is what is enshrined in the Constitution. Article 53(1) of the Kenyan Constitution 2010 actually warrants that it's a basic right for every child to have access to quality education. But along the line, we've had emerging issues of concern. What are these issues and the way forward on the implementation of this curriculum? Also, we are in the season of national examinations, and this year it is historic because the Ministry of Education for the very first time has had to administer 5 national examinations courtesy of the disruptions in the academic calendar occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic. What does this mean? What's the bigger picture? And I'll be engaging a panel of 3, 2 ladies and a gentleman to help me unpack some of these issues. But already in studio this morning, we have on set Janet Ouko. Janet is an education expert. She has knowledge in education, having served as the former education CEC in Nairobi County. And thank you so much for creating time for us, Janet.
You're most welcome.
We are also expecting Dr. Emmanuel Manyasa, the Executive Director of Sawa Agenda. He's going to be joining us on this conversation. And of course, we will be having the voice of the parents this particular morning. Nancy Shege, the treasurer of the National Parents Association, who is also a parent, cutting across both generations, having an 844 learner and also a CBC learner, under her care. She'll be sharing with us how interesting that is and that the journey has been for her. But before we, get into CBC and matters examinations, Janet, a very interesting story. Actually, it was a circular by the Ministry of Education yesterday on the new school fee burden that now awaits parents. We remember with the COVID-19 pandemic fast track, as part of measures to cushion parents from the economic meltdown, the government introduced some sort of a relief on the school fee. But going forward, what the standard is even saying there, 2023 shocker for the parents when it comes to matter school fees. Mm-hmm. And before I take you through the adjustments, just tell me a bit about how you receive this news.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think by way of background, I would really want parents to understand that it's not really a fee increment per se, because these are the facts. You remember when COVID-19 struck, then there was the weeks were lessened, so that instead of having 39 weeks in the academic year, schools had 30 weeks. And I remember it was not even a voluntary thing by government. It is parents that said, look here, we cannot be going to school for 8 weeks and still pay the same fee that we were paying when we were doing 13 weeks. And it was not even, I would like to really tell parents that it was not even a fee reduction, because the same amount of money that you could have spent on your child in school, then you were also spending it at home. So we are back to where we were before COVID struck, because we are now going to be doing 39 weeks. And so really it is fair to say that it is not a fee increment per se, because realistically, if we are going to be keeping children in school for 9 weeks, then somebody has got to be paying for that cost of 9 weeks. And then who is that person? So I think we're just back to where we were, because the 53,000 school fees is very well documented by a task force that was headed by Kilemi Mwiria. And it was a really task force that really brought down the cost of secondary education from what parents used to pay 190,000 to a moderate 53,000. And it's also fair to mention, and for most parents, especially that have had the experience of taking their children to secondary school, we all know that the 53,000 that is documented here is not the amount of money that is being paid in Alliance, in Mangu, and in so many other schools. So much as parents would want to be talking about 53,000, I know, and everybody knows in this country from where we sit, there are so many other costs that go beyond the 53,000. For me, it is more important that we address the beyond 53,000. What is this that government is not telling us about the cost of secondary education? What is the actual cost that parents are paying in schools? It is not even these 53,000.
All right, Janet, thank you for sharing your insights. And of course, karibu sana Daktari, Dr. Emmanuel Manyasa. He's the Executive Director of Usawa Agenda. We appreciate your time this morning, sir. We have just begun our conversation talking about a big story on the dailies this morning, courtesy of what was announced yesterday by the Basic Education PS Julius One, who says that, you know, going forward, the schools are going to revert to the old school fees that were charged before, I would say, the pre-COVID era. And just looking at what has been highlighted there for international and extra county schools, in 2021, the fee courtesy of this reprieve was 45,000. Now in 2023, it's going up to 53,500. In county and sub-county schools, it was 35,000 in 2021 during COVID. Now it's going to go up by 5,000, making it 40,500. Special needs schools, 10,790 in 2021. Now it's going to go up by 2,000. That's making parents who have learners in these schools are going to pay 12,790. For the free day secondary, there has not been any adjustment, so the school fees remains as is. But Janet says it's not an increment. We're just going back to where we were. My question then is, have we gone back to where we were economically, looking at the parents and the burden that they have? There was a reason why this was introduced. Are we out of that season, Daktari?
Thank you for having me, and apologies for coming in a bit late. Okay. I think that I anticipate some more increase on the fees because the cost of living, which the school principals must contend with in running schools, is very high right now. So while we think about the parent, the school principal must also juggle the practicalities of running a school. Mm-hmm. And so I think that the government has announced formally the return to the pre-COVID school fees, but I expect that at some point there's going to be an increment of that fees beyond what it was pre-COVID. The challenge is that the economy is bad for parents as well. So the question will be, what do we do to make sure that children remain in school? And so I hope that there can be very open conversation around that. What can government do to maybe increase a bit of what it is giving schools as capitation to enable children to stay in school? Because principals must run schools, and everything does not cost what it costed before COVID.
Janet, you have sat on a table where such conversations have been held. I want to understand, you know, who should bear this burden? Because you saw even during COVID, even after there was that holiday and that relief of our school fees, some parents were still struggling to pay that. And now, Daktari here is telling us that going forward, chances are that we are going to go beyond the fees that was charged even pre-COVID. I mean, what are we looking at here, and who should bear the burden?
By way of background, let's say that what is our operating environment? And our operating environment is such that we have a constitution that gives the right to education to a child. And that right is supposed to be compulsory, and it's supposed to be free. Basic education. And basic education stems all the way from ECD to secondary school. That is the environment that we are operating under. But the complexity is that a lot of our secondary schools are boarding. So that now the government can meet the cost, because government will tell you that day schooling is free. You know, day schooling is free. But who is supposed to meet the cost of secondary education? And that is where a lot of us have been doing campaigns to say, deboardingize our schools. Because this concept of boarding is what has caused our education to look very expensive. Because really, if your child is going to be spending at school, then there are costs that will accrue. There is food, there is boarding cost, there is electricity, there is water and all that. So are you telling us that government should meet the cost of your child sleeping in school? That is the conversation. But you see, the same government is the one that is supposed to support the deboardingization of our secondary schools so that they become accessible. Day schools are really accessible to many parents, because then what you need there is about the tuition costs, which government is meeting about 22,000 for every child per year. And so that in this whole conversation, one person has let us down, and that has been government. Because even today, as we wake up to the news that there is going to be a fee increment on the part of parents, government has not increased the funding to education even by a coin. Since 2013, when government decided that we are going to be giving XYZ amount to support day schooling, that amount has not been progressing as you would expect the amount to progress. Do not mind that it is the responsibility of government to really offer basic education. I think we've really taken our standards too low. I see it in some tables, and I listen to conversations, especially coming from school heads who seem to be wanting to pass the buck, to the parents. And I really understand them because they have to run the institutions. And yet government is so rigid on financing education. But if we are to remain, to hold government to account totally and completely, we must say that the right to education of a child must be protected. Government must up its game in terms of funding education. And when we say that, it is not to mean that we are encouraging parents to be lazy. No, 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 no. We knew that when we were making the Constitution of 2010. Then if we really want parents to start paying for the cost of basic education, we must have a referendum in this country and we revisit our Constitution and we say that no, we do not agree as a country that basic education is a right for every child that should be free and compulsory. But as long as we are implementing this Constitution, we must remain guided that we are implementing basic education that is supposed to be free. When some people are discussing, don't think about your own circumstances. Maybe you can afford, and maybe you think that you can meet government halfway. We are not discussing about you here. We are discussing about that child that is an orphan, that doesn't have anybody. Their right to education is sacred, and that child has to be protected. And I think that is a premise. And when you see the push, like now, the conversation about CBC, which we shall come to, has really brought to the fore what a lot of us have been saying about the cost of boarding secondary school. It really does not make sense that a child who is attending, for example, Gatina Primary School, they have been doing day school for 8 years. But when they are admitted in Form 1, they must go and sleep in school. And now the cost of education then becomes that that child must pay 56,000 a year, yet they can still commute to the school and back. I think we really need to change our minds about it. And the cost, the question of cost is coming to haunt us, because even as much as we want to complain, you cannot pack your child, take them to the school, and do not expect to pay for the cost of feeding, the cost of washing, and so on.
All right, Janet, I'm following your line of thought, and this one I want Daktari to comment on. You know, doing away with boarding schools, is it even practical? Let's begin there.
First, it's not. Second, there are reasons why we have boarding schools in this country.
Yes.
And we must not escape that reality. We did a study last year. A girl in a boarding school, a girl in a day school, is 4 times more likely to get pregnant before she finishes school compared to a girl in a boarding school. Are boarding schools good for girls? Yes, way better than day schools. KCSE results this year, 46,000 students scored E. 36,000 were in day schools. Are children learning in those so-called day schools?
And this is not to scare.
They're just growing up. They're just growing up. Do you want to offer children a cheap education that takes them nowhere? Or do you want to foot the cost and make sure that these children are getting an education that takes them somewhere? That is the conversation we must have. And the conversation is not that secondary school is expensive and that government can't afford. Kenya government puts the highest amount of money in education compared to any other country in this region. And it does very well. And it's a very significant part of our budget, which makes the question of government increasing the amount of money it puts in education much more complicated, because it is already putting in so much.
But why does it seem like it's not enough? What is the
money is not enough because it is misapplied. That is the beginning point. You remember the Auditor General saying the CS for Education, former CS, spent 10 million shillings walking around trying to inspect the distribution of desks. What nonsense is that? They didn't tell us what were the value of the desks that he was distributing, that he needed to spend 10 million on the road. Money in the Ministry of Education is misapplied, but the allocation is sufficient. We need to begin there. The children who can't raise fees, there is sufficient money in this country in bursary kitties, except that it is so scattered all over that it doesn't serve the purpose. An MCA has a bursary fund, an MP has a bursary fund, a women rep has a bursary fund, the county government has a bursary fund, the national government has a bursary fund. We have philanthropists like Equity Bank, like Coop Bank, like the Jomo Kenyatta Foundation. They're all putting money in bursary fund. That bursary fund is not structured and is not well managed. So you get one person, one child, has got money from Wings to Fly, has got money from the county government, has got money from the MP. Now they have overpayment, so the parent is fighting with the school to reimburse them money that is not theirs. We have those cases, a lot of them. What we have not done, and this is what I fault a lot of education stakeholders, is that we have not taken time to sit down and structure properly how the money in education is spent. If we structure the money that is being spent in education properly, we will educate every child, and we will not give them a cheap education.
As we're just about to move on to the next session of our conversation, Janet, what do you say about that? We have money, enough money. In fact, our country, like he says, is putting in more money in education compared to other countries. The problem seems like it's the people managing it. What do you think?
Good thing is that I have sat in government. And I have
so tell us what happens behind the scenes.
You know that there's all this talk about a lot of money. And for example, when I want to use the example of Nairobi County and think about the amount of bursary that the MCAs receive, which when I served as a county executive committee member, I am the one who used to administer the fund. And at the time, every member of the county assembly would receive bursaries of 4.5 million Kenya shillings. We have 85 wards in Nairobi. And for one ward in Nairobi, you would find that the MCA has only 4.5 million Kenya shillings. And the population and the needing cases in that particular ward is more than 20,000 people who would actually require. And sometimes, I think the beauty of working in government is that you really get to come face to face with some of these scenarios, you know, as opposed to maybe imagining that 4.5 million is a lot of money. So the member of the county assembly is now forced to split this money in a way that it will be felt by everybody. Some people have criticized that why would you give somebody 5,000 as opposed to maybe picking about 20 children and supporting them with a full bursary. You know, the truth of the matter is every household has a need. I'm taking, for example, a ward like Njiru Ward, for example, in Kasarani, where really the population there, almost everybody there, if you would pick the people that work, you could call them about 20% of the population. The rest, 80%, have no source of income whatsoever. They depend on washing, you know, mjengo, and those are the people that we are talking about. So that even taking their children to day school, they will have difficulty facilitating those children to probably buy uniform and so on. So the MCA is left to say, let me spread it to about 5,000, you know, per person. That would give you I'm trying to help Emmanuel understand where the rubber meets the road. You know, where the rubber meets the road, what exactly are we talking about? So that, for me, I move away from saying government has a lot of money. And the conversation should be at household level. How do we make sure that at household level, households are not spending on basic education? Because basic education is supposed to be free from the government. So that the government is supposed to make sure that households do not spend as much as they are doing now. And that is where the intervention of day school. He will also tell you that Kenya is the most boardingized country in Africa and the world. We do boarding quite a lot. Is it cost effective? And how sustainable is it? You just need to visit one of our secondary schools and see today what we are doing. With the same government that has a lot of money, you will find one dormitory, they've now expanded to 3 deckers, sort of packing children. Form 1 in some of these schools has 700 children, all of them packed in that institution, really practically speaking, even? How are we expecting the school to go about even understanding?
What about those, Janet?
I need her to respond to the question, do we just want to take children through the system? Tell me why 36,000 out of 46,000 who got E's are in day schools.
And true, the answer is that the same government has not done so well in improving our day schools. The question here is about equity. Can we ensure that we standardize all our schools? It does not mean that everybody must go to Alliance for them to excel. We have people that went to very good highway, secondary school in this city. We have Michinda boarding, secondary. We have good day schools. So the question here is about government standardizing and ensuring that even the day school, where a child will just wake up from their house, walk to the school, even if the child does not have the monies that are supposed to be paid for lunch, they can carry a meal that their mother cooked. That's what we did.
What about those who find school as a safe haven? Those who lack even the food that you're saying, that for them, the meal that they can afford to have is in school.
It is a good
Those
point.
who have a roof over their head, only in school. The thousands of girls who run away from the insecurities they face back at home and find that safety.
And I submit that really, yes, I know that there are some places, especially the pastoralist communities, where boarding really serves as a haven. There are isolated cases that can be dealt with as such, but we cannot make national policy based on our failures that we are not able to make safe. That girls do not feel safe in their homes with their parents, and so we make a national policy that makes education so expensive and out of reach. I really do not think that that is the way to go.
All right. I know we can have this conversation over and over again, especially now that we are...
The truth is that it's not just in pastoralist areas where girls are unsafe. Studies that were done during the lockdowns indicated that there was prevalent domestic violence in homes across this country. It was not just in pastoralist areas. We did a study after the schools reopened, and a lot of girls reported gender-based violence during the extended closure of schools. So these girls are not just insecure in pastoralist areas, they're insecure across this country. And the girls who have gotten pregnant when commuting to school are across this country. They are not in pastoralist areas.
Is the solution locking the girls in school, or is the solution working on us as a
many of them, like her talking here, were locked up in school and they
excel. Choice of words there.
So they don't need
schools. But I understand both your thoughts on this. Advocating for solutions at home, solutions within communities to create a safe environment for learners, and also looking at how this has also offered solutions based on our failures as a community, and also...
Our reality is that we are not that ideal community where a girl will be safely walking from Madare to a school and back home. We are not.
All right.
And unless we want
I will not
to escape.
end before asking this question. Which is riskier? Barring this girl from her right to education, because education costs 60,000 and the household cannot afford, which is riskier? That she can get pregnant or that she cannot not go to school completely. I think for me, not going to school for any girl is riskier than a pregnancy.
Modone, I have told you there is enough money in education. You have just told us about an MCA having 4.5 million. Remember, the MP for that same area also has money. The women rep for that same area has money. If they were not maximizing political support and everyone wanting to look popular by giving everyone money, they could separate the children they give money. I am a beneficiary of a presidential bursary when I was in high school. Because it was being a national bursary fund, they were not trying to maximize political support. They did not try to distribute. I was given fees for my school fees.
So what you're saying?
So I understand that if we consolidated, and I'm happy that the Presidential Working Party has that as one of the terms of reference, to look at how do we consolidate the bursary funds and manage them in a way that makes every child benefit, rather than if you give a child who needs 10,000 to go to school 2,000, they still don't go to school. You give another child, because the father is your political supporter, 2,000, even though they have paid school fees, you have just given the money to buy drugs in school because they already had paid the fees. That is what the politicians have been doing with the bursary funds, and it's common sense. My constituency, At some point, the MP said, we will pay full school fees for children who have scored 400 marks and above, and was paying fees for that. All these were kids from academies where their parents are unable to pay. We have just not allocated the resources properly.
All right. I want to close that conversation because
you know why I'm laughing?
Obviously.
Because luckily I've also been a politician, and I know that a lot of the things that politicians are told, really, if you do the math of having 700 children in Mwiki ward that is so populous, has 100,000 voters, for example, you will see that 700 is a drop in the ocean. So the question is that, even as we say that I would also support probably amalgamation of the bursary funds, but I know that in terms of really reaching the poorest of the poor, we still have quite some bits, to be done. And the question will always be that we do need more resources and more resources. But even when we say more resources and more resources, we also need to come up with programs and policies that are sustainable, because we can't keep throwing money at our problems.
All right. And also look at who is managing this money, as we ask for more money. Who is managing this money on what?
The money is more important.
Yes. All right.
So the people who manage the money are known, and many of them, we have their record.
All right. So I want us to shift gears a little bit and focus on something else that was also part of our conversation this morning. The national examinations are just here with us. It's a season that, has already kick-started. Of course, some candidates, I understand, are going through their oral examinations. And of course, it is going to kick-start proper Friday. And I just want to run you through some numbers here on what we are looking at going forward, even as a total of 3.4 million candidates are expected to be sitting for these particular examinations. There you can see those who are going to be sitting for the Kenya National Examination, from the Kenya National Examination Council, the Kenya Primary School Education Assessment. A total of 1.2 million candidates are going to be sitting for what is called the KCPE. This is a new one, actually the first cohort of grade 6 learners taking this exam under the competency-based curriculum. The KCPE, Kenya Certificate of Primary Education Examination, a total of 1,244,188 candidates registered for this. And in the secondary school, the Kenya Certificate of Secondary School Examination, 884,263 will be sitting for this particular examination. So how are they going to be doing this? Let's just run you through the national examination timetable. It is going to start this particular Friday, as the grade 6 learners are going to take the exams from November 28th, running all the way to the 30th of November, the year 2022. The same days, of course, we'll also be having the learners, the Kenya Certificate of Primary Education candidates taking the exams from 28th November to 30th November 2022. And of course, after this is concluded, on the 21st of November, all the way to the 3rd of December 2023, the KCSE candidates are going to be taking their examinations. Over 800,000 candidates registered for this. And I just want to get your quick thoughts on this particular, subject. But of course, let me take you through what should be happening next year. This is the academic calendar, because we understand the Ministry of Education is also planning to go back to normalcy in 2023, courtesy of the disruptions by the COVID-19 pandemic. So next year, the first term will begin on the 23rd of January to 21st of April, 13 weeks in total. And then learners will go on a half term that will commence on the 23rd of March to the 26th of March 2023. And they will also proceed on a holiday of 2 weeks from the 22nd of April to the 7th of May 2023. This is first term. And of course, we move to second term. Second term, of course, will also be all right, so I'll just run you through what I have here for second term. On the calendar by the Ministry of Education, second term will commence on 8th of May 2023 to the 11th of August 2023. And of course, the third term, which will also see the Ministry of Education now go back to the normal academic calendar, will begin on the 12th of, on the 28th of August to the 3rd of November 2023. 2023. Of course, those numbers you can get on our website just to understand how the schedule is going to go back to normal. But we'll talk about that later. Let's talk about the exams. And you saw there the breakdown. The very first time, we are having the first cohort of grade 6 learners taking the exams alongside KCPE candidates. And of course, this year alone, we've seen the Ministry of Education administer a total of 5 national examinations. Talk to us about what this means, Daktari, in terms of what the Ministry of Education has to deal with in terms of the finances, the resource distribution, and even the manpower that is going to be manning these particular exams. What are we looking at?
Exams is one of the most wasteful things that we do in this country. I'll not be surprised to see CSEs walking around invigilating exam. And we have never been told how much goes into just funding them to run around with zero impact on the quality of exam, because they are running around at zero value to the quality of exam. But we spend heavily on them. We have, as a country, said we want to move away from a high-stakes exam. But if you send a CS to invigilate that exam, how is it not high-stake? I have submitted to the task force that, in my view, we should not even have had the KCPE exam for the grade 6. Why? Because it is supposed to contribute 40% of their total score. The other 60% is fictitious. I can say that on record. I have no fears.
Also,
if anyone was to do a reliability test on the marks that teachers have put online, those marks are not reliable. And teachers have told us as much, that when they're pushed with impossible deadlines, they walk into a cyber cafe on the deadline, open the portal and just enter marks without reference to anything, sometimes even before they mark the scripts. Why? Because there was a lot of mixed messaging, a lot of information that this CBC is not going to be there. So teachers didn't take anything serious. They didn't believe it is going to be there. They thought it is going to be abolished. The marks that they entered for grade 3, for grade 4, for grade 5, which is supposed to account for 60%, is fictitious. So now you come with a KCPE with your 40% of what value? Secondly, in my view, and I think we're going to talk about the transition, these kids, the proposals now are to have them remain in primary, or from where I sit, take them to the sub-county secondary schools. If that were to happen, we don't need an exit exam. And if people recall what the president said when he was launching this curriculum, he said there will be no exit exam from primary. So this exam was introduced as an afterthought. It adds zero value to the progression of the children, and it is going to cost the country money. Such are the monies I keep talking about. If we structured how we spend the money that is in education, we will provide better opportunities for every child in this country to get a good quality education.
Janet, what is your thought? I mean, 3 national examinations running concurrently around the same season, and we're just talking about how this is going to stretch the workforce and the resources. And, you know, 2 national examinations have been administered this year. I mean, what are your thoughts? Did we have to go this direction?
Well, I think the grade 6, KCPE is not very clear, as Dr. Emmanuel has put it. And suffice to say that the mixed messaging that has been going on, we are going to scrap CBC and so on and so forth, because the background here is such that it was expected that at grade 6, we are not going to be having a transition bottleneck. And you know, an examination is such one bottleneck, because when you start by gauging, we don't know the purpose. You know, we don't know the purpose for the KCPE, because if government has also said, or maybe they have not officially said, but we have seen indications, you know, from the Presidential Working Party that junior secondary school is going to be domiciled at primary school. So you would just expect that it's a walk, you know, from this class, therefore you join the next class, and therefore it did not maybe necessitate a terminal examination, sort of. So I really do not understand, unless maybe the purpose was to probably just gauge, you know, where the learners are. I do not know that then, if that was the purpose, we are going to spend how much money in it. Again, also in this country, we do not have a lot of openness in terms of spending, so that even when we want to discuss how much is spent, we already do not know how much is going to be spent, you know, administering the examination, and also in other costs, as Emmanuel put it, that the officials of this country will be all over the place, you know, invigilating and so on and so forth. But I think for me, the major concern there is the transition, you know, is a transition issue, the transition question, that at grade 6, are we going to be seeing learners falling off? Because from grade 6 to the junior secondary school, then I do not know the logistics that government is going to put in there to make sure that the 1.2 children that will be sitting the KCPE, you know, tests, all of them, the 1.2 million, transition, because it's going to be a tragedy having a 13-year-old or a 12-year-old that has fallen out of the system. I think for me, the concern is more and more, how do we make the transition as smooth and as, you know, and as costless? Because the world over, it has been proven that the biggest barrier to education for any child is levies. So what is this junior secondary school coming in like, and what is the transition going to look like? I think that's a very critical issue. And beyond the domiciling, there is also the issue of that you have moved from primary school to junior secondary school. And there is a uniform question. Now, I want to submit here that much as parents are worried about this 53,000 that you see here, but the cost of uniform in this country is something else that really we need to have a national conversation as to how one will be putting on a 20,000 outfit just to go to school. Those are some of the issues that are making so many children to be out there, and the parents.
You're asking a question that I know would excite a guest that has just joined us, Nancy Shege. Nancy is a parent, let me start there, of learners who cut across from the 844 system, and also has a learner who is currently undergoing their competency-based curriculum. But most importantly, she's the treasurer of the National Parents Association. Thank you, Nancy, for creating time for us. We were just talking about the cost of education and the burden that now weighs heavily on the parent. I just want to feel from where you sit, do you feel like parents in this country are a bit overwhelmed by what they have to part with when it comes to taking their children to school?
Yeah, I think, thank you very much for calling me here and welcoming me. I think we as the Parents Association, all the parents in this country, we are a bit overwhelmed because of the education systems which are there, because they are very costly. We as the parents, for example, I have a child who is transiting to grade 7, and then another one transiting to Form 1. So having a child in grade 6 and in class 8, it makes us very, very difficult as the parents, because we are, in fact, for grade 6, we don't know, we are not even sure whether our children will transit to grade 7. Because when we look at the infrastructure in secondary school, it is not even, it is not available for our children to transit there. So we are stranded. The education system is very, very high.
All right. I mean, Dr. Why are we having, I'm actually sitting here and I'm wondering, why are we having this conversation about the basics? Things that we should have discussed as a country before this train left the station.
Because when Amina told us, let us hold this conversation before we proceed, we shouted her and hounded out of the Ministry of Education. We are a country of impulses. This is what is politically correct now, it must be done now. When someone says, let us sit and think, they are shouted down. We started to implement this curriculum before we had a complete costed implementation plan. We still don't have it now.
How many years down the line?
Because
that's critical.
Because KCPE kept producing versions of it, and the government will not commit. to any of those versions. And for that reason, we got into the implementation process before we had allocated cost and said it will cost us this much to educate a child from PP1 to university. They will need this much at PP level, they will need this much at primary level, they will need this much at secondary level. And how are we raising the funds? How much is the government putting in? How much are development partners putting in? How much are parents putting in? And answering the question of how do we deal with the children whose parents can't pay to make sure they still enjoy their constitutional right of a free and compulsory basic education. We did not address that. So it is coming back to haunt us now. But having said that, I think the most vexing question right now is the issue of where are the children transiting. I need to explain that when a decision was made to have a transition happen at age 12, it was based on research that had shown a lot of children were dropping out of school at age 12, 13 anyway. No, the fact that they were still in primary notwithstanding, because in some of our cultures, children go through initiation at that age, and they feel too big to continue being in primary school. And many of them were dropping out. So our decision was made, let us create a transition at that age, they move into something new. That during that time, they feel different now, we move them into a different level, and we use that level. In fact, some of us had proposed that junior secondary be just 2 years. We use that level to try and figure out which path this child is going to take before they go to senior school, where they will be divided according to the pathways that they are taking. So that transition is important. That is one. Secondly, I know that the Parents Association submitted a memorandum saying we should domicile junior secondary in primary school. And a lot of people are saying that. But those people are blind to the fact that we have primary schools that are struggling to be even primary schools. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think people are just here in Nairobi or in some other wealthy parts of Kenya. Go to Kilifi now. See primary schools that are not even primary schools. You won't tell me we'll put a junior secondary there. And those children will not be disenfranchised.
Struggling to be primary schools to mean?
Struggling to be primary schools in the sense that some of them have children learning in the open. Mm-hmm. Some of them have children learning two groups in one classroom. Like here now, one teacher is teaching from there and another is teaching from here. Mm-hmm. So if you put a junior secondary there,
so you will
not disenfranchise those children. And those children, some of them will not drop out of school out of frustration. So I have a problem with that. I know that we have had issues around the numbers, but I have some numbers here. Of the numbers you have shown us here in the examinations, sub-county schools are presenting 486,000 candidates, 397 this year. And those are 6,867 schools. We have another about 1,000 sub-county schools that don't have Form 4s this year. They started much later, so they haven't reached Form 4. If you look at the numbers in Form 1 in sub-county schools, it's about 900,000. So the about 900,000 students in Form 1 are the ones who are going to move to Form 2. Yeah? And create the 900,000 spaces there. To me, those 900,000 spaces can accommodate junior secondary. If we decide sub-county schools will take junior secondary.
But don't we have candidates?
Let me just finish.
Are sitting for KCPE
because they are 1.28 million. And out of those, 264,000 are in private schools. Out of the KCPE candidates, 264,000 are in private schools, most of which have been asked to create space for junior secondary. So many of them, at least 160,000 from where I sit, will have their own children transit in those schools. So if you have 160,000 transiting to private schools where they currently are, and saying 100 will move back to public, and you have 900,000 in sub-county schools, that gives you 1,160,000. That takes us to 80% transition. This country has not had that level of transition. Magoha told us 100%. KNBS data tells us last year we had 79% transition rate from primary to secondary. Mm-hmm. So let us not lie that we will realize 100% transition. The spaces available can take at least 85% of KCPE in sub-county schools. Now, the question that we'll deal with is where we take the Form 1.
That is what I want.
Because we need to start to create, senior and junior school. They are not going to be the same. They require different facilities, different teachers, and different competencies.
Let me just get your quick thoughts, Nancy, here. Do you feel ready to, is it a son or daughter, the one who is in grade 6?
It's a daughter.
Yeah, are you ready to let her go several kilometers away to a boarding school as the transition one?
No, not necessarily. So that's why I've said they should go to sub-county schools.
Yeah.
87% of our sub-county schools are day. And so even those that are not day can be opened up to be day. For junior secondary, I support day because we have 12-year-olds. We need them to be in a day school.
Yeah.
And the long term should be to separate junior secondary from senior secondary so that we have the 12 to 15 years in one school.
All right.
And the rest in another.
There's a reason I've asked her that, because I want to get what you prefer as a parent. There's a concern that parents have shared with regards to the options that are there on where to take your child. What works for you?
I think for us as the parents, let me first comment on the parents. We are saying the grade 6 now, they should transit in the primary school, but then we call it lower primary. And then when we go to grade 7, we call them upper primary, because the children, or my daughter, she is 12. I cannot allow her to go in a day school where he will meet the class 8 now, who will be in the Form 1. They are 15 years and above. My daughter, she is only 12. In the secondary school, she will find other learners who are 14, 15, 16 years. How will they even manage? How will they even be in the playground? How will they talk? A girl of class 6, class 6, grade 6, 12 years, with another learner who is 17 years. They will not even manage even when they are talking. And we will risk our girls. In fact, we are living in a town. I will risk my girl telling her to mbonda matatu to school with a grade 7 or class 8 student. So what we are saying, what we are recommending as the parents, grade 6 should transit in primary school, but the structure should change into upper primary. And then from now, the Form 1, we should call it senior secondary for our children to be able to transit and to feel comfortable with the parents, because they are very young. A grade 6 student is very young to mingle with class 8 or...
Thank you, Nancy. So Janet, how do we resolve this? Because they're already having the KCPE exams, and this means that what should happen next is that they transition. We are all here talking about how there seems to be some level of unpreparedness in terms of where they go, and even confusion. Let me even cite that. So how do we fix this? Because it seems like time is not on our side.
Well, I think also the question of preparedness. I like giving this example that being Kenyan is a unique thing. So that a simple example, such as maybe getting the Huduma cards. You remember the Huduma cards, that the Huduma numbers, that we had an entire, say, 3 months to go and register and collect. But the last week is when everybody was rushing. In fact, the last day to necessitate additional time. And up to now, there are people who still did not go and collect the Huduma numbers. So that there is no particular day that we shall say that we are fully prepared now. We just are very pathetic at planning and at doing the right things. And I like giving the example of Mwai Kibaki when he came in 2002 and declared free primary education, he was heavily criticized because the arguments that we did not prepare, we struggled, and we're still struggling to date. But it was a beautiful thing to see 1 million more children coming back to school. It was phenomenal.
So how do we apply that in this CBC dream?
Yes, the issue about preparedness, and I like saying, and I like my colleagues like Emmanuel, because we've walked this journey for quite a long time, resolving or maybe reforming our curriculum is a conversation that has stayed with us for a very, very, very long time. We talk about the Vision 2030, and when you read the Vision 2030, our education system was supposed to adjust because what we were doing in 844 could not help us, achieve the aspirations of Vision 2030. And so still that time, during Mwai Kibaki's time when the Vision 2030 was written, the conversations about reforming our curriculum were begun. How far are we from 2030? We are barely, I think we're 7 years shy. So at what point then were we supposed to prepare if since the inception we did not prepare, and now we are here, we are 7 years shy to 2030, and we are still saying that we are not prepared. So that I would say that it was bold. It was a bold move to relook at our curriculum. I would say that for me, this is a phenomenal time because we have not seen a time when education has been this politically, it's occupying a very high profile at the political table. And the education sector is the gainer in all this because just for this conversation, 10,000 classrooms have been constructed in our schools. Even if CBC goes away, the 10,000 classrooms will not go away. We know and we have had a struggle about building the infrastructure. For the first time, we have seen CDF do amazing things in our school. So for me, and having been within the sector for, I think, over a decade now, and having conversations about, let us improve this, let us build this, I think the conversation around CBC has really has brought tremendous change into the sector. It is not something that we will live to regret. And when I listen to the conversations from parents and the assessments, some are saying, I have seen a big difference, and I would probably want to listen from the parents. I've seen a big difference between my child who is doing the 844 and my child who is doing the CBC, to want to say what is the bigger good. I challenge a lot of people, and even the members of parliament, and those who've been walking around saying CBC this, CBC the other. Their children are not even in 844 schools. Their children are in international schools. What have they seen in international schools that is not in 844 schools? Yet they want to encourage the Kenyan children and the Kenyan poor to continue enjoying a system of education that is seriously not preparing them for the world that we want to become, that is seriously compromising other competencies and other potentials of those children. So what I'm saying is that, yes, the country was probably not prepared to begin the CBC conversation, but I really want to laud the previous administration for taking a bold step, to begin. Yes, there are challenges that abide, and I want to encourage the current administration and to really say that congratulations, that what we were fearing, because there was a lot of political undertones that we will scrap off CBC and so on, but it is a listening government. They have listened and they have said, no, we think CBC is good, but we want to improve it in this way and the other way. And I think that is the way to go.
All right, Janet. Nancy, do you think CBC is good? You have like generations of learners from 844 and the CBC learner that is under your care as well. What experience have you gotten from both, and are you contented that CBC is the way to go?
Yeah, CBC is the way to go because, like, for example, if I can give it, my girl is able to wash the clothes, cook tea, cook rice. In fact, even if I'm away, they cannot even sleep without taking food or their supper. So I support CBC, but then we need to look at it in a way that we will make it more better than the way it is now, because it's quite good. It is preparing our children to the market out there. Because like now, I have a child who is in grade 5, and she is doing juices. She is selling the juice to the students, and she is making money. Yes.
All right. Daktari, I mean, in terms of learning outcomes, and now we have candidates who are going to be sitting for exams that cut across, the ones under the CBC and the ones who are still under the 844 system. In terms of outcomes, what are we looking at? Where do you sit on that matter?
I I didn't get the question properly. In terms of which outcomes?
In terms of the learning outcomes that are promised by the CBC and the ones that we had under the 844, what do you propose?
Okay, truth is that we needed to reform the curriculum. That is not in question. We advocated for this reform. We are happy that the reform has come. I am unhappy with the haphazard manner of implementation because it is likely to cause disaffection and therefore lack of public support to a process that is actually very good. We have to make sure, to me, from where I sit, we need to get the Ministry of Education working as a system. Magoha ran the Ministry of Education ran as an individual enterprise. We need to get the Ministry of Education to function as a system. I want to see the National Education Board, which is provided for in the Basic Education Act, established to advise the CS, because that is supposed to be there by law. If necessary, I want to see a standing committee set up with a simple mandate of troubleshooting the challenges that will emerge in the implementation of CBC, because we are implementing something new, so there will be new challenges emerging at every level until the current grade 6 graduate from university. Every level we go will be a new level. We will learn something new. We will meet new challenges. We need a system that troubleshoots those problems to the end of this process, because we want this to succeed. Thank you so much. And we've run out of time. I'll give you, Nancy, 30 seconds for your final words, then Janet, as we close. Nancy?
What I would like to say to our students who are sitting for exams, the grade 6, the class 8, and the Form 4, the National Parents Association wish them success. Thank you so much. Janet?
Really, thank you. And I think for me, the issue here, the big issue is about transition, because again, we will be staring at headlines in January about so many children not able to go to school. I do not want parents to focus on the 53,000, but we must really work together to bring out all other hidden costs and to just make sure that education is affordable for every child. I like telling people, don't think about yourself, think about that orphan, think about those so many other marginalized children that cannot be able to access this public good.
All right. Daktari, your final thoughts as my colleague Ayub joins us. A lot has been said on social media.
I join the parents in wishing the candidates all the best, and the teachers who are going to be administering these exams the best of time, and wish the task force, because I know they must be working on a draft report to present to the president. I wish them a very productive and promising, and they need to understand on that report the future of this country's education relies.
All right.
I wish them all the best as they write that report.
All right. The report is set to be coming out in the course of this week. And of course, we anticipate that that is going to inform the next course of action when it comes to the implementation of the competency-based curriculum. Of course, a lot still to be discussed under this, and it's a topic that we should be picking up as we continue to just look at the status of our education sector in the country, coming at a time when there's efforts that are being put in place to ensure that we have all learners access education, and not just education, but quality education for that matter. And I've not been doing this show alone. Of course, my colleague Ayub Abdikadir on the other side. Just to pick your quick thoughts also, as you were joining us on social media, what have you been saying, Ayub?
And very important, such as an insightful discussion of the education and the preparations for the examinations. And of course, we did advise our viewers to get in touch with us on Twitter at Citizen TV Kenya, at Ayub Abdikadir, and at Safin_Cheng. Here's what we're saying on Twitter. Bob Otieno Wino says basic education is supposed to be free and government should take the burden, not parents, as enshrined in the new constitution, of course, promulgated on the 27th of August 2010. Engineer Lazaro says right to basic education might be monopolized to the rich if not properly checked. Government should consider that our living standards going down while the cost of living is tripling the economy. We have other feedback, of course. These are just sampled feedback from Twitter. LJ Sindani says doing away with boarding schools is easy, and very easy for that matter. The problem, he says, is putting classes in our education system. If all schools were to be day, we wouldn't be having competition for schools and all children could access education in the country. That is what he says on Twitter. Remy Butia says Kenya should systematically remove barriers to quality education, raising teaching standards to providing greater access to textbooks, clean and safe sanitation to ensure education is accessible to all Kenyans. Oringe Waswa says the government must strike the appropriate chords and get everything regarding the education sector right. Any wrong or a misinformed decision will throw our learners into a disarray and jeopardize the whole education sector. Godi Barasawere says the education sector is the much-needed software that powers up every aspect of the socio-economic machine of our country. Careful, proper and critical focus must be accorded to this sector for smooth running of affairs in the country. And the last tweet from Reverend Harry Koskei says CBC, the competency-based curriculum, was overrated. It should have been implemented slowly. Thus, the government should find a mechanisms of covering the costs to ease parents' burden. Success to all the candidates, the KCSE candidates and the KCPE candidates, and KCPE, he says, as per his tweet. And of course, there are some other tweets that are coming in on Twitter handle. Of course, this is on the hashtag Daybreak. Bernard Okanga says, I agree with Manyasi, who is one of our guests here this morning in regards to the topic at hand. Besides the conducive environment offered in boarding schools, he says, distribution of these schools is extremely skewed. My locality has over 15 secondary schools with a radius of 5 kilometers. If we were to do day school, he says this would have been relocated, and most are church-sponsored, according to him. Of course, many feedback coming in, but because of time, we can't sample them all at this time. And such informative discussion that you have had with the guests.
Indeed, just looking at the status of education, one Omar Ahmed says, not everybody has a school next to their homestead. Kenya is not only in urban towns with schools and matatus. Of course, also another one there saying parents have a choice to take their children either to boarding school or to day school. But of course, this conversation should continue. A lot is to be said. Continue interacting with us on social media. Let's, take this forward. And of course, just thanking my guests for the show this morning, Janet Ouko, an education expert, former CEC for education in Nairobi County, Dr. Emmanuel Manyasa, Sante Daktari, the Executive Director of Sawa Agenda, and Nancy Shege, Treasurer, National Parents Association. Asante, Ms. Shege, for creating time for us this morning. And my name is Safina Chiengoma. Always a pleasure to do this for you each and every Wednesday morning. We appreciate your time and your contribution on the show, by the way. Because we won't do always this alone, we also thank you again for your time and company, because you chose to wake up with Daybreak on Citizen TV, at Citizen TV Kenya, at Ayub Abdikadir, and at Safin_Acheng. They say learning is eternally continuous. Thank you for your time. And thanks to my colleague, Fosi, and thank you to you too for watching. We'll see you next week here at the same time on Wednesday on Daybreak at Citizen TV Kenya. Good morning.